Good day, each and everyone. I'm Miss Sherilyn Castillo, and I'm here to discuss with you Chapter 4, Dimensions of Communication. Now, what do we mean by dimensions of communication? Dimensions of communication talks about the number of ways idea can communicated. And also, these are the ways on how we are going to interact. Now, we actually have this first dimension of communication, that is verbal or nonverbal. When it comes to verbal, it encompasses the use of language, the words chosen, meaning to say what are the words that are coming out from our mouth. However, or on the other hand, when it comes to nonverbal, this pertains to the facial expressions, the gestures, and even bodily movements that we use whenever we cannot communicate through our mouth. Okay? How about on the other slide? We also have this oral or written dimensions. When it comes to oral dimensions, always remember that this is also called as spoken communication. This imparts the message following the principles of delivery. However, when it comes to written dimensions, this talks about the transcription of thoughts and ideas. Next, we also have formal or informal dimensions. For formal dimensions, always remember that this observes the appropriateness when it comes to dress, the words that you're going to use or the language itself, and even the setting. Again, this means that you are going to make sure that whenever you're going to communicate with people, whoever they are, always remember to have or to observe appropriateness with what we have mentioned earlier. Because again, this is a formal dimension. Now, on the other hand, when it comes to informal dimension, there's no need for you to look for any appropriateness, or there's no need for you to follow any appropriate words, dress, or even the settings. Okay? Because in informal dimensions, or informal dimension, I mean, this uses a more casual approach with no regard for the formalities. Next, actually, in formal dimensions, these are following examples that we have. Okay, now the first one is we have responsibility. So, for example, it was my responsibility too. For the second one, we have initiative. For example, I took the initiative too. Okay, how about on the third one? Result. So, as a result of my actions, okay, and how about the fourth one? We have measurable. The measurable increase in profit was. And lastly, we have example. Here's an example of how I handled that. So these examples that we have for formal dimensions are the usual words that we can use for a formal setup whenever we are going to try to communicate, or whenever we are going to communicate with people, okay? And on the other hand, when it comes to informal dimensions, these are the following examples. So we have no, yeah, whatever, OMG, groovy, sure, that's cool, and kinda, okay? Now, let's move forward. How about on the other dimensions of communication? We also have intentional and unintentional. So in the intentional dimension of communication, when the listener receives the intended message of the speaker. So what's the example that we have here is when a girl blushed when a guy noted her as one of the beautiful girls in their classroom. So meaning to say there is an intended meaning why they wanted to communicate with people. Now, when it comes to an intentional dimension, when one intends something but did not receive the actual result. So an example here is when when people laugh at something that was said, even the speaker meant it to be taken seriously. Okay. Now, Remember, those are the 4 dimensions of communication. The first one is what we call verbal and nonverbal dimension. Second one, we also have written or oral dimension. Third one, formal and informal dimension of communication. And the last one is intentional and unintentional dimension of communication. And so let's have and move forward with the 7 C's of effective communication. So actually, there are many ways on how you're going to communicate effectively. And so for you to become an effective speaker, all you have to do is for you to be reminded of this. So for the first one, that is completeness. Communication should include everything that the reader or that the receiver rather needs to hear for him or her to respond, react, or evaluate properly. Next, conciseness. Conciseness is very important. You have to make sure that you are going to be or that you're going to communicate straightforward or be straightforward whenever you're going to communicate. Okay. Now, we also have this what we call consideration. You always make or you always see to it that you're going to considerate everything when it comes to your receiver or when it comes to this people that you're going to communicate with. Because obviously we have differences when it comes to background, preferences, education, status, and many more. So again, you have to make sure that all the information that you're going to share with them are the relevant only. Next, how about concreteness? So when it comes to concreteness, that is an effective communication happens when the message is concrete and supported by facts, figures, and even real life examples and situations. You always have to make sure that you have a basis, okay, whenever you're going to communicate with people. So this basis rather talks about facts, figures, or even the real life examples and situations being stated earlier. Okay. How about courtesy? So the speaker shows courtesy in communication by respecting the culture, values, and beliefs of his or her receivers. Always see to it that whenever you're going to communicate with people, always know how to respect them. Okay? Because again, we have different cultures, we have different values, and we also have different beliefs. And if you wanted to make sure that the communication is going well, okay, or if the communication went well, see to it that you were able to respect them also. Okay. Now, aside from this, we also have clearness. So clearness in communication implies the use of simple and specific words to express ideas. So meaning to say, always remember that you're going to use only the words that everyone's familiar with. If not, of course, how are you going or how will they be able to understand you? Okay. Now, correctness. So correctness in grammar eliminates on negative impact on the audience and as well as increases the credibility and effectiveness on or of the message. Okay. So again, those are rather the 7 C's of effective communication. So again, whenever you're going to communicate with people, always see to it that you're going to observe those 7 C's that we have. Because if not, miscommunication will be observed. And aside from that, you will not be able to fully, or you will not be able to get what are the intended meaning of the message that has been brought by the sender or you, okay, as the receiver. Next. So obviously, when it comes to communication, barriers are here, okay? So barriers to communication. Now, barriers to communication refers to miscommunication and misunderstanding because, again, there are certain barriers that we have to consider. So to become or for you to become an effective communicator, you should recognize these barriers that hinder the communication process, okay? So for example, or what are the barriers rather that we have here? So as you can see, we have emotional barriers. We also have use of jargons, lack of confidence, noisy environment as well. So let's start with emotional barriers. So of course, when it comes to emotional barriers, this talks about the emotion of this person who's trying to communicate. Okay. So for an instance, you have or you are having a bad day or you feel frustrated. So the solution is, okay, recognize these kinds of emotions and politely ask for other person to give you a moment so you can relax or calm yourself. So actually, aside from knowing what are the barriers to effective communication that we have here, we always come or we must also come up with a corresponding solution. So that's the first example that we have. Okay. Again, emotional barriers. So the example is you are having a bad day and you feel frustrated. And so the solution that you're going to give or the solution that you're going to do is for you to show or for you to recognize these kinds of emotions also. And please be polite, okay? And ask the other person to give you a moment. So again, you can relax or calm yourself. How about use of jargon? So when it comes to use of jargon, an example here is you are a scientist discussing a certain weather phenomenon with your neighbor who does not know much about the topic. So what's the solution that we can provide here in this kind of barrier? So let's know first, by the way, what jargon is. So jargon refers to the set of specialized vocabulary in a certain field. So again, for you to avoid this kind of miscommunication, okay, you have to make sure that you're going to use the layman's term, okay? Or only the simple words. Again, for you to communicate with them effectively. Okay, how about lack of confidence as one of the barriers? So we have here the example. So you are asked to share something about your day or weekend, but you are hesitant because you are shy. So what's the possible solution that we can give or that we can do? So for this, develop self-confidence by joining organizations where you can share and develop your interests, okay? Look for those opportunities in your school or community that will help you find your strengths and improve your abilities also. So again, you have to make sure that you're going to work out for your this kind of problem that you are facing in, especially in communication. So lack of confidence, I know it is already there, but again, as a person, for you to be able to communicate effectively with the people around you, you have to make sure that you're going to boost this confidence that you have. Okay. And anyway, the last one that we have here for the barriers, we have the noisy environment. So of course, an example for this is you are having conversation with some friends when a song was played loudly. So what is the possible solution? So recognize that noise is a common barrier. So make some adjustments by asking someone to minimize the volume or by looking for a quiet area where you can resume the conversation. So again, when it comes to noise environment, that's already there. Okay, we cannot predict that, okay? Because noise is actually everywhere. And so the best thing that you can do is for you to adjust, okay? So again, these are the barriers to effective communication with corresponding solutions. And of course, as a communicator also, or if you wanted to make sure that the communication will uh, go well, or let's say that the communication will be an effective one, always remember that you are going to see to it, okay? That you were able to know the dimensions of communication, that you were able to use 7 C's of effective communication. And lastly, you are going to give a solution to the barriers of communication that we may encounter as we go through with the said process. Okay? So, thank you for listening. That's all for today. So, if you have any questions, you may ask us. Ask us, rather. So, again, I'm Miss Sherilyn Castillo. I hope that you enjoyed our lesson for today. Bye.
For more ICCT College's video updates, please subscribe and click the notification button.